A store owner was shot and killed inside the shops at Redbird yesterday.
Investigators say a woman named Rashonda Lowe entered the mall with a gun and shot Jaime Rokkett several times. Fox 4's Stephen Dial is live with more tonight. Stephen.
Steve, we went in that mall today and I spoke to multiple business owners who said they were in there at the time of the shooting, saw the two arguing, and then heard multiple gunshots. According to court documents, investigators say the victim's wife told them that he had a restraining order against Lowe. The cookies and smoothie store inside the shops at Redbird was closed Wednesday, hours after it became a crime scene on Tuesday afternoon. Court documents say just before 4 p.m. on July 1st, Rashonda Lowe shot Jaime Rokkett multiple times in the head, chest, and legs with a handgun, then drove away from the mall in a white SUV. Investigators say there's mall surveillance video of Lowe arriving at 2:35 in the afternoon, and then the two talking at the cookie shop for more than an hour. Court documents say Lowe pulled out a handgun and started firing, then jumped over the counter and fired more rounds at close range.
To those who referred to her as Shondanda, she was far more than a typical therapist. She radiated positivity, charm, and a kind of spiritual warmth that made others feel safe. Her life philosophy was centered around the healing properties of energy, the balance of karma, and the transformative power of personal growth. But healing others becomes much harder when the one needing healing is the healer herself. On July 1, 2025, that contradiction came crashing down inside a cozy dessert and smoothie shop located at the shops at Redbird Mall in Dallas, Texas. Inside that store, 53-year-old Jaime Rokkett lost his life in a chilling, cold-blooded shooting. The perpetrator was not a masked criminal or a random attacker. It was someone he had once deeply loved. The shooter was Rashonda Lowe, a 43-year-old licensed therapist, someone who had dedicated her professional life to guiding people through emotional trauma, pain, heartbreak, and the turmoil of the human condition. That day, however, she brought all of those elements, anger, pain, loss, right to Jaime's doorstep. Security camera footage captured her arrival at the shop just before 3 p.m. Her presence was not friendly. She hadn't come to catch up or offer a smile. She came to confront, to challenge, to revisit the wounds of the past. The footage shows a heated verbal confrontation unfolding between the two, tension hanging in the air as their voices grew louder and more agitated. After nearly an hour of simmering emotions, Rashonda made a devastating decision. She drew a firearm and began shooting. She didn't stop after a single shot. Even after Jaime collapsed behind the counter, she jumped over it and continued firing. By the time authorities reached the scene, it was too late. Jaime Rokkett had succumbed to his injuries. Rashonda, meanwhile, had vanished from the scene, initiating a manhunt that would follow. Yet, this wasn't a spontaneous act of passion or emotional overwhelm. It had the hallmarks of a premeditated, calculated act. Rashonda's actions violated an existing restraining order Jaime had taken out against her. She wasn't legally allowed to be anywhere near him. Jaime had moved forward with his life, remarried, and built something new, something healthier. But Rashonda had refused to let go. When emotional closure is denied and left to ferment, it can transform from heartbreak into destruction. This case isn't just about a murder. It's about a relationship that turned toxic, about love warped into possession, and about how someone trained to help others fell victim to her own inner turmoil. It's a narrative riddled with red flags, signals ignored or dismissed until they culminated in irrevocable tragedy. Jaime Alejandro Rokkett was a man whose identity was interwoven with community, compassion, and quiet strength. He wasn't just a husband, a father, and a grandfather. At 53 years old, he had become a well-known figure in Dallas, especially as the owner of Cookies and Smoothies, a modest yet beloved shop nestled in the shops at Redbird Mall. This wasn't just a business. It was a safe haven. It was a place where locals went not just for sweets, but for a sense of comfort, warmth, and belonging. Jaime had an aura of generosity that didn't need a spotlight. He mentored teens and young adults who wandered into his shop, offering them more than just a job. He offered them a second chance. His establishment wasn't just filled with the delicious scent of baked goods. It was infused with kindness, with the unspoken promise that someone cared. Jaime had experienced his share of emotional struggles. He had loved and lost. But when his relationship with Rashonda ended, he didn't respond with anger or revenge. He responded with grace. He focused on personal growth, remarried, and created a peaceful environment for himself and those around him. For many, Jaime was more than a business owner. He was a pillar of emotional stability, a dependable presence in uncertain times. However, even those who radiate light can find themselves shadowed by people still stuck in darkness. Jaime, despite his best efforts to move forward, was unknowingly still tethered to someone who hadn't healed. The threat didn't come with warnings or alarms. It built slowly, silently, beneath the surface. As for Rashonda, she defied the conventional image of a killer. Her resume painted the picture of a composed, intelligent, and self-aware woman. She was a licensed clinical social worker with a strong background in psychology and emotional therapy. At 43, she had spent years helping clients confront grief, betrayal, and inner turmoil. Her office was a refuge for the emotionally wounded. Her reputation was solid. Colleagues saw her as capable and empathetic. Clients trusted her guidance. Her social media presence often shared uplifting quotes about healing, growth, and boundaries. But what was happening behind the scenes was vastly different. Rashonda's own unresolved pain was never truly addressed. While she spoke eloquently about mindfulness and emotional detachment, those principles began to deteriorate in her personal life. Her ability to counsel others became a mask that hid the wounds she refused to examine. She could articulate the steps to healing, but she couldn't take them herself. Over time, the therapist became the one most in need of help. When she and Jaime first became involved, there was no dramatic spark. Their connection was gradual, forged through mutual respect and a desire for something real after painful pasts. Jaime was emerging from an emotionally taxing chapter. Rashonda described herself as someone on the road to healing. To outsiders, their relationship looked promising. Two adults with enough maturity to value stability. But emotional compatibility is more than shared history. Beneath the surface, issues began to emerge. Rashonda expressed a deep desire for a partner who would not just accept her, but love her children as his own. Jaime made an effort to meet her expectations, but perhaps not in the specific way she wanted. One former partner of Rashonda revealed on social media that she had frequently voiced frustration about Jaime's lack of involvement with her kids. He quoted her saying, "He buys things for me but does nothing for my children." Those statements weren't petty complaints. They revealed the emotional baggage Rashonda carried from previous relationships and the heavy expectations she placed on new ones. She wasn't just searching for love, she was seeking someone to mend old wounds. And when Jaime couldn't meet that unspoken demand, cracks began to widen. Rather than confront the tension head-on, Jaime chose to quietly withdraw. He didn't fuel conflict. He chose serenity, remarried, and refocused on living peacefully. But Rashonda didn't release the emotional grip. Her thoughts, and possibly her heart, remained entangled. Their breakup didn't lead to separation in her mind. It left a space filled with obsession. There were no explosive public breakups or dramatic headlines. Just silence. And that silence masked an inner storm. Rashonda began to unravel, not publicly, but in private gestures that grew bolder over time. As Jaime established his new life, Rashonda's presence didn't fade. It lingered. Texts, calls, uninvited appearances. Her behavior crossed emotional boundaries and then began to challenge legal ones. Eventually, it was Jaime's wife who fully recognized the severity of the situation. She understood that this wasn't a case of unresolved feelings. It was a threat. Legal action was taken. A restraining order was filed. On paper, it was meant to provide protection, to make clear the limits. But the paper couldn't fix Rashonda's internal perception of rejection or betrayal. Restraining orders function as physical deterrents, but they don't dissolve emotional ties. For someone like Rashonda, they might have only intensified feelings of abandonment. Where the court saw protection, she might have seen humiliation or dismissal. The silence that followed didn't soothe. It stirred. Online chatter soon followed. Speculation filled the gaps. Was Jaime secretly still seeing Rashonda? Had he sent mixed signals? Some believed she was manipulated. Others felt she always knew she was secondary. None of it was verified. But what it confirmed is how rejection, especially when layered over pre-existing emotional wounds, can morph into a terrifying obsession. The story didn't end with the restraining order. Nor did it end when Rashonda walked into that shop. It had been unfolding for months, maybe years, hidden in the interactions no one saw, in the emotional terrain no one mapped. A slow unraveling disguised as professionalism, hidden behind diplomas and practice licenses. The woman who once guided others through heartbreak could no longer contain her own. And the deeper that disconnect grew, the more fragile her public image became. Just a growing storm, quiet, slow, waiting for the moment it would finally break. Then one day, that image shattered violently, permanently, under the weight of everything she never dealt with. Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. It started like any other day at Cookies and Smoothies. Customers wandered in. The smell of fresh-baked cookies filled the air. And behind the counter, Jaime Rokkett was doing what he always did, building community, one smile at a time. But just after 3 p.m., everything shifted. Rashonda Lowe walked in, not by accident, not just passing by. She came for him. Surveillance footage would later show her standing across the counter from Jaime. They talked for nearly an hour, but this wasn't a friendly visit. Witnesses would later say the mood was tense, confrontational, and emotionally charged. The weight of unspoken history between them was heavy, too heavy for either of them to carry peacefully anymore. And then, sometime between 3:50 and 4 p.m., she pulled out a gun. She didn't hesitate. Jaime was shot multiple times. As he fell behind the counter, bleeding and stunned, she didn't stop. She stepped forward, jumped over, and shot him again, point blank, with chilling purpose. The man who once held space for her pain became the direct target of it. Then, just as calmly as she had arrived, Rashonda turned, walked out, got into a white SUV and drove away. It was a quiet exit to a catastrophic act. But the story didn't end there. Later that day, she walked into the Arlington Police Department and told officers she had just come from a domestic situation with her ex. In that moment, the mask of the therapist, the healer, the nurturer, was gone. In its place stood someone who had finally done what her pain had been building toward all along. She didn't just end Jaime's life, she made it personal, undeniable, and irreversible. Now, before Jaime, there was someone else, a man who knew her differently. Not as a suspect or a criminal, but as Shondanda, a woman of beauty, chaos, love, and light, all tangled within the same soul. He wasn't her therapist. He wasn't her victim. He was her partner once. And in a deeply personal post shared on Facebook after her arrest, he tried to make sense of it all. When he had Rashonda Lowe and I had Shondanda, I was in the process of healing a broken version of a beautiful soul. Being consistent, caring, thoughtful, and firmly stern on key aspects in the relationship. I was always there when she needed anything. Financially, conversations, advice, adventures, her figure for the kids. But I couldn't give her the correct form of love that she needed and required. Because I was 3 years in after my divorce, and I didn't fully heal properly. So, we separated on good terms. A handful of toxic situations happened. Cops being called, a little of harassment, and a cussing out that I won't ever forget. But an apology was given to me after all that. And we remained friends for a minute until she met the man she killed, and she took a dark turn. Her energy was draining. This guy moved in with her for a while. We found out later he was having a house built. He continued, she never would call me at night or in the evening. It was always between her sessions as a therapist. And during her lunch break, we talked about everything, which I loved because it's hard finding someone to talk to about everything and not let their emotions take over when I talk big. But every time at night, I'm blocked. Morning time, I'm unblocked. Never a text message, always a phone call. And she'd vent about how the dude was spending money on her, but didn't do anything for her kids. She said she told him her ex, me, did a lot with her kids. I did. I enjoyed her family. Her son lost his father and I could relate. I lost mine too. I tried reaching out to him, but he was tough. Made me think, was I the same way coming up? No TV, not being connected to anyone besides your mom, and watching your siblings interact with someone who cares about them? And her daughter was a sweetheart. She invited me to donuts with Dad. I took off work to do that. She loved that I showed up, and I'm glad I got to experience it. Dating a therapist opened my eyes to a lot of things. Shondanda taught me a lot, especially about energy and karma. Her energy was glowing and it was beautiful. It had its thunderstorms over it too. But it didn't get to be too much. There's no rage in those words, no blame. Just heartbreak, reflection, and confusion wrapped in grief. He didn't write to excuse her. He wrote because he saw her before she became this. He saw the storm before it broke. He held her hand through parts of it. But in the end, he had to let go. And now, standing in the aftermath of what she's done, he's left asking the same question the world is now forced to confront. How does someone so full of light end up taking someone else's forever away? There are no easy answers. Just a trail of pain. A shattered family. 2 children who once looked up to her now left with nothing but silence and the memory of a man who didn't deserve to die. The news spread quickly, a shooting at the shops at Redbird. A man gunned down in his own business. But when the identity of the suspect was revealed, shock turned into disbelief. A therapist, Roshonda Lowe. The woman who built a career helping others manage pain, now the face of unbearable tragedy. The mall closed its doors that evening, not for maintenance, not for renovations, but for mourning. Retailers who shared the same hallway as Jamie's shop left flowers taped to the gate. Notes written in marker. Simple words, "Rest in peace, Mr. Rokkett. You always believed in me. Thank you for your light." Because Jamie wasn't just another merchant. He was part of the soul of that place, someone people looked for, even when they didn't need a cookie. Now he was gone. Law enforcement labeled it clearly, a targeted domestic incident. Not a robbery. Not random. Intentional. Personal. Permanent. But behind the press conferences and case numbers was a sobering truth. Restraining orders don't stop bullets. They're paper. And paper cannot hold back obsession. It can't calm a storm already brewing. It can't unwrite resentment once it hardens into rage.
Well, tonight, the man killed inside the shops at Redbird is being remembered as a fixture in the neighborhood. Richard Solomon spoke to those who knew him and has brand new details from police about what happened.
It's hard to believe it happened.
Shot.
It's hard to believe he's gone.
You wouldn't expect nothing crazy or tragic to happen to Jay.
Was not just a business owner, he was friends with the people in the community.
And community activists Allison Williams and Jeanette Berry say his presence will be greatly missed.
He gave to the kids, he gave back to the community. He just didn't work at Redbird. He was part of Redbird.
They say Jamie helped them with fundraisers and back-to-school drives.
We should band together more so in his honor to continue the fight and the work in the community.
And that's why it's hard for them to wrap their heads around any of this. And now it's up to them to make sure his work continues.
We're going to keep moving how Jay will move, in love and positivity.
So now the city mourns, not just for Jamie, but for the failure to protect him. For the silence that let this build. For the cruel irony of a trained therapist becoming the very kind of danger she once helped others navigate. A healer became a suspect. And a man who brought joy, love, and comfort to his community was taken in a moment of pure devastation. Roshonda Lowe knew the language of healing. She understood triggers, boundaries, and abandonment wounds. She taught people how to sit with discomfort, how to process pain instead of projecting it. She helped others untangle emotional knots they were never taught to handle. But the tragedy is this: she couldn't do that for herself. Because it's one thing to know how to help. It's another to apply it when the pain is yours. When the love you wanted doesn't love you back. When the new woman has what you believe should have been yours. When silence from an ex feels like rejection all over again. There's a line that lives between love and obsession, between care and control, between hurt and harm. And Roshonda, trained, educated, admired, crossed it, not because she didn't know better, but because knowing better doesn't mean you're healed. It doesn't mean you're safe. It doesn't mean you're free from the ghosts of what you never confronted. Jaime Rokkett didn't die because of a lack of laws. He died because the wounds someone carried quietly were never faced head-on. And in the end, it wasn't a stranger that killed him. It wasn't a criminal from the street. It was someone who once sat across from him, smiling. Someone who said they loved him. Someone who should have walked away, but chose to come back. This story isn't just about one man's death. It's about what happens when healing stays surface level. When trauma is ignored because it looks functional. When we assume someone's credentials mean they're whole. Therapy is powerful, but it is not armor. Restraining orders help, but they're just paper. And when a heart is breaking in silence, no court order can stop it from eventually bursting. Rashonda once held the tools to help others. But in that final hour, those tools shattered against a heart she couldn't heal. Thanks for watching. Let me know where you're watching from and what you think in the comments section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the True Crimes Venue, and turn on notifications. We upload new true crime content daily, covering cases you know, and many you don't. Please stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard.